Dune Part 2 was directed by Denis Villeneuve on a budget of $190 million. That might sound like a lot, but compared to some movies in 2023, The Marvels was $274 million, The Flash was $300 million, Fast 10 was $340 million. The quality of Dune Part 2 absolutely blows these films away, and after watching Dune Part 2, it's sort of unfathomable that a studio would spend that much money to make this. And then, very unlike many other two-part movies, where both films are greenlit and financed and then filmed simultaneously, Warner Brothers only approved the making of the first Dune movie and wanted to see how it performed before greenlighting Denis Part 2. And well, the risk definitely paid off. Dune 1 performed well financially and was critically praised, and Dune 2 has absolutely lived up to the hype, delivering the second half and more action-driven portion of Frank Herbert's Dune novel. Dune Part 2 picks up right after the events of the first film. Paul and his mother Jessica, reeling from the attack by the Harkonnens, have now escaped into the harsh desert of the planet Arrakis and are living with the nomadic and indigenous people, the Fremen, adapting and learning their way of life, and even learning to ride a sandworm. And all at the same time, Paul is growing closer to Chani. Paul wants to help the Fremen take back their world, as well as seeking revenge against those who killed and plotted against his family and destroyed his house and killed his father. He gradually attracts more followers to his cause. The more time he spends with them, the more they believe he's a messiah or a chosen one that will lead the Fremen to paradise. And this is all further encouraged by Jessica, who becomes a religious leader for the Fremen. Meanwhile, the Harkonnens are struggling to mine spice because of the constant Fremen attacks, and the Baron grows more frustrated as he brings in his sociopath nephew, Fade Rautha, to restore some order on Arrakis. The Emperor has been informed of the issues on Arrakis and is forced to step in to deal with the Fremen and their new leader. The feeling I got from this film is just overwhelming. The sheer scale of the visuals, the storytelling, the themes, the film felt so elevated and just held such a strong level of quality all throughout the almost 3 hours of runtime. Visually, every scene was beautifully shot, the establishing shots showing the vastness of the planets, and then even the intimate dialogue being elevated with the landscapes behind the characters. Denis didn't cut any corners at all, and every scene felt extremely intentional and crafted. And of course, the music was absolutely epic, matching the scale of the visuals. Literally, you could feel the cinema vibrating at some points because of the frequency of the music, just adding to that atmosphere. And of course, there is plenty of CGI and explosions to render things that are literally impossible, but they're weaved in between these practical effects that pull everything in together to make it feel grounded and real. And yes, this film has plenty of action, but the action exists to drive the story forward, rather than just being a centerpiece of a film that needs a huge conflict at the end to resolve the story. Although the story of the Dune novel was covered over 5.5 hours over 2 films, it definitely still was condensed, because that book was just pretty intense. In the film, certain characters didn't exist, certain plot points were downplayed, and other plot points were exemplified. The focus on the world building and the themes of the novel were all very present throughout these 2 films, and it sticks close enough to the book, but the writing makes it accessible to those not familiar to the books. The complicated story of religion and politics and the warnings of the cult of personality and the dangers of blind faith, they're all woven into the film. In fact, I felt there was a specific intention to bring these themes even more to the forefront. And there was more of a focus to highlight that Paul just isn't simply the infallible hero. But there definitely was a real risk that the film could have just played it straight and just tried to do a one-to-one adaptation of the novel, which I feel really could have made it into a convoluted mess, appealing only to hardcore Dune or sci-fi fans and alienating a broader audience. But I feel like Denis streamlined the story in a really practical way that just made a lot of sense for the film, but still maintained the essence of the book. Timothée Chalamet did an amazing job and definitely is in top form in this film. In the first film, he was playing a princely figure that was still learning the ropes, and I think he absolutely nailed that. I mean, he's got that classic boyish charm that he's known for, but in part 2, he really had to sell this transformation. And I think he did an incredible job, being able to move from being pensive and regretful, which we see in his early scenes with Chani, to someone that can command all the attention in the room and demand respect, and eventually transforming into a ruthless and vengeful messiah figure. And the character of Paul is of course mirrored on the opposite side by Fade Routher. And Austin Butler was incredible playing this sadistic murder machine. He was so cold and an absolute savage, it just made your skin crawl. Every time he was around people that were alive, you were just wondering if, or more accurately when, he was just gonna unalive them. Zendaya as Cheney was also great. Zendaya's always been cool, she's been good, but I never really understood what all the hype was about. And considering she only had like 7 minutes of screen time in the first film, while being in all of the promotional material, it really felt like she did have to step up and deliver. And she does that. She does a really great job being Paul's guide and his partner, but then also having more of a role than in the books, as being the voice that directly questions the religious beliefs of the Fremen and Paul's decision to act on those beliefs. And Javier Bardem just killed it as Stilgar. He provided a lot of levity and comic relief in a movie with an extremely heavy atmosphere. And it didn't come at the expense of his character, it didn't just make him look stupid or foolish, it felt extremely natural. Florence Pugh, Christopher Walken, Stellan Skarsgård, and Rebecca Ferguson were all great as well, but we just didn't really spend that much time with them because of the sheer scope of the film. This film has incredible pacing, even though it has a pretty long runtime. It keeps pushing forward, there is a constant tension and momentum into action, but then it just ends fairly abruptly, and that is how the book ended as well. All of the momentum and build-up of Paul and Cheney's relationship, of Paul's destiny, of the impending war and chaos, and for the conflict with the Emperor to end fairly quickly and to just end right there at the beginning of a whole new chapter of conflict, it's definitely a strong statement and really brings home the idea of losing control just as soon as you seem to have finally gotten it. I do feel like some people will be put off by this, but I can definitely see its merits, and it does lead nicely into a potential third installment. Dune Part 2 is definitely worth watching, but you need to watch Part 1 or it literally will make no sense. And I feel that Part 2 offers way more meat to the story. Part 1 really just sets the table, establishes the world, the characters, and the tone, and Part 2 really does a lot of the heavy lifting for the story and the transformation of Paul. Dune definitely won't be for everyone. I can see people that might find the religious and political angles sort of uninteresting, and like I said before, they might feel like the ending is extremely rushed. And on another note, many filmmakers have borrowed ideas from Dune in the past, like in Star Wars or The Matrix, so people might feel like they've seen all this before, but you do have to remember that Dune is the original source material. It was an inspiration for many successful sci-fi films. Dune has come at such an interesting inflection point in cinema, right after Madame Web absolutely bombed and pretty much every other superhero film struggled to get any real traction in 2023. Its success just demonstrates that the blockbuster isn't dead, but rather the audience does crave an intelligent and well thought out blockbuster. They're not just there to see a bunch of explosions and a bunch of one-liner jokes that fall sort of flat. I definitely welcome more films like Dune that have something insightful to say, but don't try to force feed some political message down our throats, but rather poses questions to the audience and makes us think and reflect upon our own worldview and beliefs. And of course, it doesn't hurt that it's wrapped up in an absolutely beautiful, epic sci-fi world filled with action and intrigue. Anyways, hopefully that all made sense. For more analysis, go ahead and check out this video right here. Thanks again. Bye.